Howdy, folks. It's your old pal, David Cobb, coming at you on the Green News Network. This show, Democracy in Action. And as always, with a hat tip to Gil Scott-Heron, the revolution may not be televised, but it will be brought to you over the sources of non-corporately filtered news, information, and analysis. And here at the Green News Network, we try to bring you peaceful, nonviolent revolution ideas and actors. It is my distinct pleasure today. This week's guest is Seth Kaper-Dale, who is a Protestant pastor, a longtime fighter for peace and justice issues, who is now running the signature Green Party campaign for the entire year, running for governor in New Jersey. Seth Kaper-Dale, welcome to Democracy in Action.
Thank you, David.
So, I have the pleasure of having knowing a little bit about you before the Green Party, but I want to give our viewers an opportunity to get to go you, the individual. So before we get into your actual campaign, just tell us a little bit about yourself, Seth.
Thanks. My wife and I, Stephanie, have been co-pastors of a church in Highland Park, New Jersey for 16 years. And before that, we lived in Ecuador. And before that, we were in college. While in college, both of us became passionate about liberation theology. And liberation theology really became something strong in South America as a revolutionary way to take on the powers of oppression of government. And so that's something that my ideas about God and my ideas about politics were woven together. It led us to live in a children's home in Ecuador for a time before coming to Princeton Theological Seminary and then finding our way into a church. Since I've been in a small Protestant church, I have taken a church from 35 people to over 500 members, and we have 3,500 people a week in the building. But the thing that's most interesting about our church isn't the size growth. I think sometimes people find a niche and they figure out how to grow. Our church was 35 white people when we started. Now we have 55 countries represented in our church by first-generation immigrants and tremendous diversity of those who've been in this country of mixed races for a very long time. So the church is an incredible mix of people. And we've gotten there purely through liberation and purely through social justice. Almost no one comes through the door of the sanctuary. They come through the door of the Affordable Housing Corporation. They come through the door of our asylum program. We visit asylees and detention centers 2 times a week and get to know folks inside and then help them resettle when they're released. They've come in through our housing for homeless veterans or our reentry program called Neighbor Corps, which helps people get a start after they've come out of prison. We have a church-based mental health services, which is not Christian counseling. It's mental health services that recognize that church buildings are one of the safe spaces in many communities, where people come in. And we've been open on LGBT issues. I've been marrying gay couples since I think the first marriage I did was around the year 2002, my second year in ministry in Highland Park. So that's the kind of stuff I've been up to. Through my work, what I've learned is I'm a good administrator. And I didn't know that about myself. I knew I was passionate. I knew I could preach, but I didn't know what an administrator I was until we started building housing programs and after-school programs and a restaurant that's run by refugees called Global Grace Cafe. And I think New Jersey's lacking an administrator, somebody who listens to others, someone who believes that the great ideas that can transform a place won't come out of one's own head, but out of the commons and out of the community. And so the more I've done over the years, the more I've seen I have those skills, and I've simultaneously been frustrated by what I've experienced in government. And the people I've tried to serve frequently are only in a position of needing to be served because they've been wronged by systems. And so all of that has led me from ministry into politics.
Of course, Seth, what I would say is that you practicing liberation theology, you were doing politics. You're now entering into electoral politics.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Because, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I was active in the global justice movement in the 90s and came across several liberation theologians myself. My understanding is at its core, it's emphasizing liberation from social, political, and economic oppression in anticipation of salvation. In other words, it's not trying to replace the typical idea of Roman Catholicism or salvation, but actually says having justice here on earth is an anticipation of salvation. Have I got that right, or is there any way that you could correct me or
No,
educate me or my viewers?
You've got it right. You've got it right. But I think for me, I like to just sum it up in the prayer, on earth as it is in heaven. We can begin right now with the praxis now, that this place might be as beautiful as the creator of the universe might want it to be. And if it's going to be that way, it's not because we're going to think our way there. It's going to be because we're actors together. The key to liberation theology is that praxis is the first thing, and that no reflection can happen without reflection being reflection on praxis, on action. And so we try to act first and reflect on action. It makes preaching a very exciting thing, because we're not at all preaching out of scripture read in a glass tower. We are preaching on scriptures reflected on in conjunction with the actions of a loving community trying to make a better world.
So, folks, you're listening or you're watching Democracy in Action on the Green News Network. I'm your host, David Cobb. I have today Pastor Seth Kaper-Dale, who is a Protestant pastor and the Green Party nominee and endorsed candidate for governor in New Jersey. I want to encourage folks, if you'd like to ask Seth a question or make a comment, please write in comments. Technical Director Michael O'Neill will be taking those and feeding them to us. And already, Seth, Cheryl has written in to ask, Seth, how as a pastor can you maintain a separation of church and state?
The first thing I would say is that most people who run for office are grounded in some spiritual life. That's a very normal thing in American politics. I'm no different than that. If I become governor of the state of New Jersey, I will stop being pastor. So I will maintain that separation. I will not at all shirk the fact that a central part of who I am is the grounding I have in my faith tradition. That's actually the very thing that will make me a strong governor. And I'm proud of that. But there will be a strong separation of church and state.
Seth, you mentioned being a strong administrator. And of course, current New Jersey Governor Christie has really come under, I mean, ridicule is probably the only way that I can really describe, his last year or so. But something really disturbing has happened, or at least has been finally reported. It's clearly been a long time problem. And I'm talking about New Jersey water crisis. Yes. I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk about that.
Yes. So New Jersey has a terrible problem with lead in the water. And it didn't just occur, during my time running for governor. We have known that there's lead in the water. If you look at every year, the DEP has to report or asks town to report on the quality of its drinking water. This year, on June 30th, 2 towns had levels higher than Flint, Michigan. And despite the fact that 2 towns had lead levels higher than Flint, Michigan, there's not a peep coming out of the governor's office. So we have a governor who chooses to be strong in his own way of interpreting strong every once in a while about certain things that draw a lot of attention. Kind of reminds us of the man that's sitting in the White House right now, too, while at the same time letting other things just pass by completely. So in the state of New Jersey, we need a governor who can see that if there's any issue that deserves solidarity across the board, it's the issue of water. We've got lead in our smallest towns like Milltown, New Jersey. We have lead in our biggest cities like Newark. Not every town has to report every year. There's a good chance that if we were to have a much more serious reporting mechanism in place, we would see on a much more regular basis just how many of the children and the vulnerable people in our communities are at risk of serious health risks from the lead, not only in our water pipes that are old and corrosive, but also within our homes, because before 1987 in New Jersey, any home that had pipes inside it had lead in the solder. So we've got a problem, and we need someone who's going to step in and say, this is a problem for the state as a whole. We're not going to just leave this up to individual homeowners.
So Jeff, Seth, I got to tell you, several people have already written in to ask, how can we help? How can we support this campaign?
How can you support the campaign? What I'll tell you is copperdaleforgovernor.com/donate would be the best way to help our campaign right now. In the state of New Jersey, in order for anyone to be included in the public debates, you need to raise $430,000. That's 4 times more than Jill Stein had to raise to run for president. That is, we're in a very, very corrupt state where the two-party duopoly sets the rules and they keep driving up the price of what pay-to-pay politics looks like. We have done an extraordinary job of raising money. We've raised over $100,000 now as a campaign, but that puts us a long way off, and we have 3 days to go. So what I need is $100,000, friends, per day for the next 3 days from those who are watching this show. And that might sound crazy, but if every single person watching the show was to pitch in 15, 20 bucks, we would see a dramatic change. It's not that hard to get to those numbers. If we could convince people that challenging the duopoly in at least one state this year makes a lot of sense.
And I do want to remind Green viewers and Green-friendly viewers that this really is the signature Green Party campaign and the signature progressive campaign happening anywhere. And Seth, Craig has written in to say literally, that's crazy. A $430,000 goal just to get matching funds and debate access for a gubernatorial election. The system being rigged like this is ridiculous. And he points out that in New York, the Green candidate was able to get access to the debates in the last 2 gubernatorial elections without having to meet these outrageous goals. Yes. So the system is clearly rigged in New Jersey. I want to encourage folks on a personal basis to please join me. I've already given one donation. I'm going to tonight give another donation to this campaign. I'm going to ask Technical Director Michael O'Neill to put specifically the donate page into the comments. And I'm also going to ask Michael to tee up. I'm going to turn to you, Seth, first. But Michael, if you could get ready, because you've got a really great video or commercial that your team has created. I want to remind people, if you like what you're hearing, it's important that you comment on this and that you share it on your own list. The only reason that we're getting the kind of reach, the only reason that we're getting the 7, 8, 10,000 unique views that we've been getting is because you have decided as a viewer that you're not just going to hate the corporate media blackout, you're going to help become the media. Seth, I do want to actually give you an opportunity before we go to your commercial to set up and just say broadly what some of your key campaign issues will go to to your commercial, and then we'll come back and talk about it. So Seth, big picture, what are the issues that you're running on?
So the big picture, first of all, is the campaign slogan is "The last are first." And we feel that oftentimes we start with the middle are first as progressives, and we want to start in New Jersey with the last are first. Last time there was a gubernatorial election, 61% of the people in the state who were registered did not come out to vote. And when we've kind of examined who it is that isn't coming out, it's people who feel disenfranchised within our system. And that is where we're starting. We believe that the last are first is both the moral thing to do, that any society ought to be deeply concerned about those who've been most wronged by systems, and it's also the strategic thing to do. We want to start there because that's where the voters are who are most likely to go for a green candidate at this point. People are really dyed in the wool, red and blue around here. It's very, very hard to convince somebody to jump ship. And instead of spending a lot of time trying to win over converts to the Green Party, what we're saying is there's a lot of forgotten people who aren't in the red and the blue. Let's start there. So we have spent our time in the streets of Paterson and Camden and Newark and Union City and Passaic and Elizabeth. That's where we've spent the vast majority of our time in cities like that, talking about things like ending mass incarceration, making sure people never lose the right to vote, making sure people can earn a living wage inside prison so that they can participate in their family economy while being locked up. We've spent time talking about increasing the child care centers in urban areas so that people are able to go to work because they know their children are well cared for, bringing back money for after-school programs. There's 438,000 kids in our state who live in households that have under $30,000 a year. This in a state where a 2-bedroom apartment is about $1,700 a month on average. It's near impossible for children to feel stable. So these are some of the things that we're talking about as central pieces of our agenda. But then we have 3 biggies that I think really talk to folks who have been the last and those who've been in the middle, but I think are also the last. These are the 3 biggies. Single-payer Medicare for all. We are pushing for New Jersey single-payer Medicare for all. We want to see it nationally, but until we see it nationally, we're going to push for our own agenda. And we believe single-payer Medicare not only allows for the human right of health care to be given to all, but also will create economic freedom that will allow $15 an hour minimum wage, that will allow bosses to hire folks for 40 hours a week instead of cutting them off at 28 because they don't want to handle another health insurance plan, that kind of thing. The second thing is public banking. We're pushing for a public bank, believing that New Jersey should be able to create its own revenue by saying instead of investing in hedge funds that dig mines all over the world, we should be investing in our own bank that allows us to build new mass transportation system, allows us to help folks get out of the foreclosure crisis, that helps us move to a renewable energy future, and that sort of thing. And finally, progressive taxation. We only have 7 tax brackets in this state. Once you hit $500,000 a year, you remain at 8.97%. Until you're making $20 million a year. And we think that's ridiculous. We think if you are making grotesque levels of personal wealth in the state of New Jersey, you should be thanking the state by kicking back a much more healthy sum the higher up you go as a wage earner. We should not ever be a state that's struggling financially, not with the amount of wealth that's in the state. We just have to get it out of the hands of the 1 or 2% and back into the hands of the people. So there's some pieces of my platform.
I'm reminded my daddy said something about money that really stuck with me. He said, son, money is a lot like cow manure. If you pile it up in one place, it smells like the shit that it really is.
Yep.
But if you spread it around on a farm, you can do a lot of good with it.
That's right.
And that's how I think about that. Folks, you're watching Democracy in Action on the Green News Network. I'm your host, David Cobb. We're speaking with Seth Kaper-Dale, pastor and now Green Party candidate for governor in the state of New Jersey, running the signature Green Party campaign, The Last Shall Be First. Let's take a look, Michael O'Neill, at Seth Kaper-Dale for governor's advertisement. Hit it.
Sometimes a choice isn't really a choice. You have a choice.
Seth, when we come back,
I'm definitely looking for the next government to have more of
now.
a hands-on approach to the local communities and the townships.
And then we've got a couple of questions
really
built up, but I'll get you to comment on that. And don't forget to hit
problems with incarceration, the school to prison pipeline. We've got problems with housing.
We demand respect. We demand respect. We demand respect.
Seth Kaper-Dale and Lisa Durden are career social justice activists who have been doing this for a long time.
Remaining silent when one must speak is the slow death of freedom.
I'm Seth Kaper-Dale.
And I'm Lisa Durden.
And we approve this message.
And we're back. Seth and I are back, of course. You were just watching a very powerful commercial that Seth and his campaign team were put together. Seth, any comments?
First thing I want to say is Lisa Durden, who is in the commercial with me, my running mate, Lieutenant Governor, someone I'm just thrilled to be working with. Lisa likes to say that she is the poster child of the last are first, and that most of the issues I've been talking about on the campaign and that we are now talking about together are issues that she's lived personally in her life. She grew up in Newark and has fought her way up to being in a place of leadership. She was a professor at Essex County College until just recently when she lost her job when she stood up for Black Lives Matter against Tucker Carlson on Fox News and was fired for doing that. So she's exactly the kind of person who resonates with the last our first message that I believe is the message that the state of New Jersey needs. I hope that the message shows that we are people who are on the ground, that we are people who are committed to social justice, and we're committed to the local community. We're people who are from the people, as opposed to people from the top now pretending to be for the people. And that's how I feel about the other candidates.
And, we've got a couple of questions, so I'll hit those. Before we do that, I do want to point out, so, Governor Christie and his ties to Trump and Trumpism are well known. The photograph of him on the beach with his family while he closed the beach to the rest of New Jersey and surrounding areas is well known. I don't think what's as well known is the Democrat who is running for governor in New Jersey. Tell us a little bit about this particular Democrat that you and Lisa are running against.
So this particular Democrat he is a Goldman Sachs Democrat. He worked at Goldman Sachs his whole life, and he is a billionaire. He made $7.3 million last year on his interest income alone. And
so I have to stop you.
Yeah.
Did I just hear you say $7.3 million in interest income?
Yeah, he made that amount of money without having a job, is what he had. Okay, interest and investments. He didn't make any money by working last year. He hasn't had a job, so that's what he makes without working. And he was the ambassador to Germany. Why? Because he was the head of fundraising for the DNC, and President Barack Obama sent him over to be the ambassador. And Angela Merkel did not want him and pushed back against him more than most prime ministers or presidents would push back against an ambassador, because she said, I'm tired of people just sending rich folks who want to build relationships with their country for the sake of other rich folks. So she pushed back. He got very embarrassed while he was there because WikiLeaks showed him saying some very childish things about her. And so that's the guy that the Democrats have chosen to put up in the state of New Jersey. He pulled $10 million out of his own pocket and funded his campaign in the primary. And all of the party bosses in New Jersey, every single Democratic Party boss had committed to Phil Murphy before another candidate even entered the race back last September or October. And that was when I decided I'm running for governor, and I'm running as a Green.
So I got to tell you, a lot of people are giving you lots of love on the comments section. Patricia writes in and says, please join me with a $20 donation. A win for Seth will be huge for Greens and progressives across our nation. Alicia writes in to say, I am so sick and tired of my money going to the duopoly. Inca writes in to say, Seth is working so very hard for the Green Party. We cannot let him fight alone. Many donations needed. If you haven't given, please start now. And again, I'm doing that as well. Casey writes in to ask, so what's your perspective on this money and influencing in government, corporate money influencing government? What's your take there, Seth?
Yeah, well, I hope I can become governor of the state of New Jersey so I can bring some of this, under control. It's out of control. That money is the thing that determines who gets to run, to give shape to a state or to a nation. So we need to get money out of politics altogether.
And when you talk about getting money out of politics, are you a supporter of reducing campaign donations, or are you a fan of publicly funded elections? What's your thoughts there?
I would like to see candidates have to get many more signatures to get on the ballot, to show that they're actually people who are out there meeting people, engaging communities, collecting the signatures. I'd like to see an increase in the demand on that end, where you have to put your feet, where you have to put your time in. But that money isn't a thing that keeps people out. I think it's okay to have a small amount of money to say, look, we're not just saying every single human being who wants to run can at the last minute say, I'm going to run. It doesn't bother me that there's a small amount of money attached to running, but I'm talking a very small amount of money. This kind of silliness of $430,000 is just a hindrance to normal people being included in the political process.
Seth, I can tell you, as somebody who has worked on both ballot access and fundraising campaigns for 20 years now, I can promise you that if you put the requirements for Democrats and Republicans on small donor lists, and you had signature requirements with a prohibition against paying signature gatherers and said you can only use volunteers, they literally would not be able to be on the debate. They would literally not be on the ballot. My perception and my lived experience is that both the Democratic and the Republican parties have become hollow shells. There's no there anymore. It's a hollow entity stuffed full of corporate cash is the only thing keeping it afloat.
Yeah, I so agree with you. And I think that's the case with this candidate who has won. When the Democratic machine comes in and says, hey, we could take this guy and he'll come in and fund his own campaign and he'll pay us something in the meantime. There's nothing there that encourages the general public to participate in financing the campaign or putting their money where their mouth is. There's a scripture quote that I love, and I don't do this much, especially not on these. But David, you've invited me to pull up my career a bit. But where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I really believe that there is something to be said for that. And I think that the Democratic Party, by saying where the treasure is just of a couple people, that's all that matters. That's really taking it away. I'd like to see 430,000 people put a little bit of treasure where their heart is tonight and support this campaign so we could take on the system. A buck of heart. Come on, folks. We can do this.
We can do it. And I got to tell you, Brian has just written in to say, I'm donating right now. You've had several people who have been inspired by these words, Seth. I want to give you an opportunity for any closing thoughts before we end the program.
What I want to say is that it has been an amazing experience to spend the last 10 years of my life, or the last 10 months of my life, it's felt like 10 years, going through the state of New Jersey and meeting people in the places which are suffering the most in our state. I can't tell you how often it is that somebody looks at me and they say, no politician ever comes here. And then they'll say, and I'm not just talking about the leaders of the state, but no local politicians even come here. There are forgotten people in our state. And I believe around the country that is a similar lived experience for many. They feel forgotten. The incredible thing about Jill and Bernie was that we don't believe in this flyover state stuff that the Democratic Party so often seems to promote. They just leave some states out altogether. I don't believe in any flyover spot in the state of New Jersey. I believe we get to every community and we let the people who are most forgotten know that their vote matters and that their lives matter. And if New Jersey is going to be beautiful, it's going to be beautiful because they're seen as beautiful and they're able to fully participate in the system.
Seth Kaper-Dale, thank you so much for being a guest on Democracy in Action on the Green News Network. I want to end by encouraging viewers to share this video link. Let's let Seth and Lisa's message spring and spread all across the country. The concept of whoever is last will be first priority in the Kaper-Dale Green Party administration. That message needs to get out. Let's make sure that he gets on the debate stage by meeting this outrageous requirement. $430,000 is a lot of money, but there's a lot of us watching right now. Right. We can do this. Seth, thank you again for joining us. Viewers, I want to thank you for continuing to support what we're doing. Peace.